Welcome to Topic A, everyone. I'm your host, Gary Perna. This week on Topic A, I'm joined by Andrew Shecktor. He's running for U.S. Senate. We're going to find out why and what led him to this decision and what he's hoping that you will learn from him while he's on this show. Stay with us, everyone, on Topic A. We'll be right back here on WYLN. And welcome back to Topic A, everyone, here on WYLN. And I'm very pleased to have Andy with me. Andy, you are deciding to run for U.S. Senate, and you told me it was okay to call you Andy. After it was a long process. You started writing a book, the state of the economy, and the failure of the healthcare in the United States. So. Tell me the process kind of that led you, a little bit of your background, first of all. You're an electrical engineer. You're not a doctor. You're not a lawyer. You're not a political guru. What led you to writing this book? What kind of led you to say, this is kind of something we need to look at?
Well, statistics more than anything. I mean, I started out when the healthcare debacle came on, started. I said to myself, what is going on with this? Why are we even considering this? Because it's not a comprehensive healthcare plan. It doesn't take everybody in consideration, and it's going to fail. So I said, well, what's the real problem? And I started looking at the numbers and going down this rabbit hole. And it was a rabbit hole that led me through many dark tunnels. And I suddenly realized it all branched off, and it all came back at that one tunnel that comes out back into the bright sunshine, which is the economy. And the whole problem is, starting in about 1970, if you look at the charts, and you have to go back to the raw data, because a lot of the government charts, that's a whole other story. I've been working on that. They contradict each other, especially the Bureau of Labor Statistics. I get hammered on that all the time. But if you actually look at it, since 1970, a couple of things have happened. I call it the perfect storm. The biggest issue is the public welfare system. Medicare, Medicaid, disability, all began in 1970. Now, if you look, and also we all went off the international gold standard under Richard Nixon. Now, if you watch the path of inflation, we've increased inflation by about 2,000% since 1970. Wow. One of the reasons we don't recognize that is that business is doing real well. And you were losing employees to computerization, to electronics, to all kinds of machinery. To businesses doing great, but people aren't, which is the real problem.
Now, when you were going through and researching this book, finding the information to put it all together, was there something that really drew your attention, drew your man, this needs to be the key point that we got to push out to everybody?
Well, yeah, the key point ended up being, when you look at international, like Japan, for instance, is a good example. Some of the European states that are actually functional, and look at us. You're looking at, we have 62% of our workforce is employed right now. If you go from the real statistics, and that workforce is comprised of only 1/3 of the population. When you look at Japan, the workforce is 2/3 of the population, and 92% is employed. They can, you have to pay taxes, you have to pay into the system, or you can't buy the infrastructure, you can't buy your health care, and you can't buy anything if the people aren't working and paying for it.
In your opinion, going through this, when you were putting this together, what are the biggest flaws in our healthcare system that was enacted under President Obama? Well,
what Obama put in place was a Band-Aid. There's really, sadly, there's no flaws to what he did. The problem is it should never have been done. What should have been done is the system have been restructured. We should have fixed the economy. And you'll hear very few mainstream politicians talking about that. And it's funny that all the various rallies and functions that I go to, that I bring up the economy and they refuse to touch it. They'll touch on Iraq, they'll touch on North Korea, whatever, but they won't touch the economy because they know it's so hard to fix the thing. There's two schools of thought. My belief on healthcare, I hate to use the universal healthcare designator because as a Republican we believe that in general that a free market system can work, assuming that there's money in the system and the corporations aren't greedy. It's a pretty big assumption.
Right.
Universal health care, when you look at it today, 46% of Americans have universal health care. When you include Medicare, Medicaid, CHIP, and all the other programs, it comes to about 46%. Yet people are saying, we don't want universal health care. And yet the remainder of that 46%, half of them are going bankrupt when they go to the hospital because they can't pay their bills.
Right.
So it's something you can look at, but I hate using names for anything. My belief on health care is that, personally, I don't want to see anyone going out on the street and dying or be afraid to go to the hospital because they're afraid they're going to go bankrupt or can't afford the bill.
What, to you now, the book touches on the economy and healthcare. That's kind of what your platform came off of to run for U.S. Senate. Is there any good advantage? Is there any good thing that could come out of the Republicans repealing and replacing the whole thing, or should it be done in small bites instead of trying to replace the entire thing?
Well, yeah, that's a great question. And I think this is going to be a long-term commitment. I think eventually you're going to see either universal health care or some kind of mandatory restrictions on a free market, kind of a reined-in free market system, because it's just not working with the economy. But we need to fix the economy. That's going to be long-term. So I think that if the Republican, actually, Ryan's thing about coming in and saying we need to support governmentally the sickest of the people, which we can't pay for that. I can't pay for the sick people. But the government's going to pay for it, and we're going to pay for it through the government. So we're still paying for it, but it's more dispersed at that point. I think as a temporary solution, what they're looking at might be feasible, but it really needs to be looked at long term.
Now, when we get a lot of people who complain about welfare, that people are on it that don't belong on it, or overstaying on it. Locally, our state representative has pushed a lot for welfare reform. That's only in the state. The federal government, I think, holds a big piece of that puzzle where they need to be responsible for it. In your stance, should there be drug testing? Should there be programs saying you've been on it this long, now you need to be able to find a job, or you need to be able to find a program? Do you think there should be limits in place?
I believe there should be. And now the biggest chunk of this whole disability thing is the SSI workers' disability primarily, and SSI disability, and a lot of that needs to be looked into. Is it valid or not? But the big problem right now is the fact that the funding has to come from somewhere to be able to fund these programs, and if they're on disability, they should be held accountable for that. If you can't just stay on disability forever. There was one state that said, as far as like the opioids, are like, well, if they 3 strikes you're out, we're not going to give you the Narcan anymore. I don't think you should go to that extreme, but I think you really need to say, look, if here's the jobs, but now you have to make those jobs available. And one of the things that ACA did is that it took away full-time jobs. and everybody went part-time, and they're supposed to go out and get their health care on the open market, which is too expensive. You got two-worker families, and I mentioned that in the book. Two-worker families are a big thing. The corporations look at that. You got twice the money. They're going to raise the price of everything. And then the ones that are not two earners are really in trouble, especially the senior citizens and the single mothers and single fathers that are out there. That's a big issue.
Do you think if you could repeal and replace Obamacare, fix it, a lot of businesses right here in our area have either closed up shop or have went to part-time because they couldn't afford to offer health care to everybody, and that hurt our economy with them moving out. Or you see that pay raises aren't being given to employees because now they're saying, well, I need to put that towards your insurance. So any good come out of Obamacare when this was put into place?
Out of the program for Obamacare or out of repealing it?
Out of when we put it into place, and all these companies are now starting to go in and say, we can't afford to employ you.
When we put it, absolutely no good came out of it, because what happened is you put 14 million people on insurance, and it's great. I love it because I like to see people have insurance, and you took 14 million off. My wife doesn't have insurance, and I hope the IRS isn't listening, because they want to charge you $700 if you don't have insurance.
Right.
But they're going to charge you $700 if you have for the insurance, or through my company $500, and my wife only brings home for like $450. That is absolutely insane, because they base it on the family income, and they deliberately put her below 30 hours of work, so she would have to go out on the market to get that. What needs to be done is they need to penalize those companies that are putting out that part-time employment. Companies with too much part-time employment, we should do the exact opposite. The ACA that encourages it and discourages it. We should, and by penalizing, I said you should throw the carrot and not the stick. What you should do is offer companies an incentive, maybe a tax incentive for having more full-time employees with insurance than part-time employees.
You think a tax credit would work for employees to say, listen, the more you put on full-time and you're able to get them health care, we can give you a credit.
Right. Exactly.
Wonderful.
Exactly.
All right, I'm going to stop right there. We're going to take a short break, but stay with us here on Topic A. We'll be right back. And welcome back to Topic A here on WYLN. I'm Gary Perna, and I'm joined by Andrew Shecktor, who is running for U.S. Senate. And pick up our conversation before, we were talking about Obamacare and its lackluster appeal to many people in the area, especially when it comes to those who may have lost jobs because their companies couldn't afford to cover them on insurance. But you mentioned something quickly about the IRS. And I want you to be able to just recap what you said.
Yeah, there's an interesting thing. The reason I mentioned the IRS in particular is there's a thing called the Laffer curve. And you're familiar with the Laffer curve. What it says is basically that there's a curve about a third of your income. If you're taxed more than that, or if there's more of a burden on you of things that are not necessary to your lifestyle, you're going to start cheating. And the IRS has reached that point where I'd say a vast majority, a huge number of people are not paying the taxes, they're lying on their IRS forms, and they're not getting the revenue that they're looking for to begin with that. But I believe that the IRS should stay out of anything other than collecting their internal revenue tax. I don't believe they should be taxing anything else, and they shouldn't be put in charge of health care. That mandate is one of the big things that separates the Democrats from the Republicans right now. We got these great things, but we're getting stuck with it as the middle class, paying for the other people who are getting this insurance.
Before I move on from healthcare into something else, I want to ask, do you think that really that government should be in charge of healthcare? Do you think there needs to be a fine line where they can maybe cap the insurance companies and say, this is it here, you can't charge more than this, you can't exceed more than this? Where do you think, and do you think government should have a cutoff point of where they can and can't dictate to insurance companies?
That's a good question. I think that either way, the government's involved is the real problem. Again, I have the one statement: I don't want to see anybody go without health care, and I think you shouldn't be afraid of it. Should the government be involved? Oh, well, certainly, to some degree. Capping would be great. I think one of the biggest problems is the commercialization of the hospitalization, and the hospitals going commercial as opposed to being nonprofit. I think that's was a huge mistake. And then incorporating these hospitals, you see, all the different, I don't want to mention any names, but we all know the names and all the players that are all incorporating and coming together to form these giant conglomerates. And when giant conglomerates come together, it costs us more. So I don't know that we can trust corporate America anymore. I just don't know that. Either we need to have the government limit that or take over the plan. Again, that's something for a committee to decide and to look into, but it's got to be taken the time to do that, and we have to have the economy working first.
So I want to move over. You decided to, writing this book, you decided maybe I should run for Senate. The wheels started turning. And during the last presidential cycle, you went on the ballot to become a delegate for the Republican National Convention. And you were in ballot number 15. You were kind of towards the bottom, second page.
15 names.
You were really at the bottom. And in those, really, and I think it's fair to say to anybody, if you are on the ballot to be a delegate, usually at the top 3, top 4, because people kind of go, they really don't know. They say, yeah, okay,
and sometimes the very bottom one works too, but oddly enough.
So you were lucky enough, the bottom one was the lucky for you. You went out to the Republican National Convention. Talk a little bit about your experience with that and kind of how that reinforced your beliefs into running for Senate.
Sure. Now, there's two things. One of the things that I did is I kind of ran an exploratory. One of the great things about running for delegate is you don't have to report your expenses. You can bring in all you want. You don't have to worry about it legally. So I figured, well, I'm going to take whatever I can and do kind of an exploratory as I'm going in there, just to find out, while I'm running for delegate, hey, by the way, if I ran for delegate or for Senate, what would you think of that? And then gave my platform. And I got such a phenomenal response that people were saying, yeah, give me your card, give me your name, we'll follow you, and if you run, we'll support you. And then at the convention, I basically said, I intend to run for Senate. I'm not announcing yet, but that's my plan. What do you think of it? And I kind of put my foot down very straightforward. To the point where I went to Priebus and Rob Gleason were there, and I looked at the two of them heading the GOP, and I said, here's the deal, I'm running for U.S. Senate next year in 2018. I said, you're either on board or not. I said, I don't need you to win. You're either on board or not. And they looked at me like, who is this guy? Well, I've gotten so much support from the patriots, from people, from citizens, from both the Republicans and the Democrats, that I said, you know what? I'm going to run. You're allowed to run. Any citizen can run. I encourage other citizens, run for your local office, run for bigger, go for what you think you can do. because that's our right to do that, you know, and help your community and help change things.
And locally, you've been a member of Berwick Borough Council, Berwick Planning Committee. So you're not just some guy coming out saying, "I want to do this." You have some experience in it as well. Now, getting to today, you've announced that you're going to run. You're looking at what you want to do. It's some key points. I visit your website and I was looking at some things. We talked about healthcare really in depth in the beginning, but I want to talk a little bit about something that really is a main focal point, especially in our area, immigration. You know, we saw the president partial what he wanted in banning travel. What are your stance on that? How do you look at immigration? How do you think it should be handled? Are we handling it properly?
Well, that's interesting you mentioned that, because that's touched on in the book also. Oddly enough, these things all come together. Believe it or not, we wouldn't have a country without immigration. In fact, right now we are actually either negative or positive 1 or 2 people, you know, per thousand per year, and our main growth is from immigrants. And you know, we were all immigrants. I don't know, and less than one of us is not an immigrant, unless even the Native Americans are immigrants. So I mean,
true.
You've got to have that influx, but you don't want, what you don't want is radicals, whether they're Islamic terrorists or whether they're, you know, Nazi supporters or whatever you might want to, whoever might be trying to get in here to influence us. You've got to restrict those people, and especially if they're coming in on a long-term visa. So we do need to restrict that.
Do you, as somebody, and I'm sure you're going to get this question a lot while you're running, do you stand with our current president on a lot of his platforms? Do you support yay or nay? Not on all things, on all things. How do you stand?
I've always supported the president, even when I don't like them. Even when Barack Obama was in office, I've supported them. I've talked to them. I've been cordial. They're the ones in charge. They sink or swim on their own. As far as Donald Trump goes, I do support him. I would, you know, whatever he would want to do, I would definitely back up and let him know if there was an issue with it. As a senator or member of Congress, you're supposed to be the representative to the people.
Right.
And you need to bring that voice, whether you agree or not. You need to bring that voice before the president, before the Congress, to let them know this is what the people want.
All right. We're going to take a break here. We'll be right back on Topic A to recap before the end of the show. Stay with us. welcome back here. We got a couple minutes remaining to the end of the show here, and Andy, I want to real quick some fast-fired questions. A lot of people think we should tear up the Constitution and start over again. Your belief, it has got us this far. What do you stand for on the Constitution? Does anything need to be changed, or should it be something that we abide by?
Well, I believe the Constitution should stand as is. It was given to us as a gift, and we should respect that. I do believe that we, as a lot of folks do, including some of the great representatives in our state, that we should have term limits on the Congress in particular. My personal belief is that the House should be 4-year with a 2-year maximum, and the Senate should be at 6-year with a 2-term maximum. That would require a constitutional convention, and sadly, if you do that, a lot of things would be changed that we don't want changed.
Right.
But I stand 100% by the Constitution of the United States of America.
Second Amendment supporter?
Absolutely, okay. 100%.
You know, the Senate plays a key role, especially in getting bills to the president's desk. This area is scarred with not a lot of, and something that President Trump would love to turn around, and he may get his way in bringing more of the coal industry back. Do you foresee that happening? What's your stance on that? Would you fight for more jobs for some of our coal miners and those jobs here in our area?
Well, I think you're seeing a big change. Coal is passé, and I believe I support it. I told the Friends of Coal when I met them out in Cleveland, I said, you know, you got a downhill battle. You got an uphill battle, rather, because coal is going downhill, just in general. It could be utilized if it's clean and that sort of thing. But I just have a feeling that there are other technologies and energies that are going to be coming into play, and you know, your solar and all other things, wind and other new technologies.
Before we did the show, we were sitting outside talking. You said to me, we need a few more scientists in government.
Right.
Back that statement up. Why do you think more scientists compared to maybe more lawyers or doctors?
Well, you know, scientists are interesting people, and I can say that having being an engineer and working in the science and physics field. And you know, a lot of them will come, especially with the you know, global warming, global change. You need to be able to explain the graphs and the charts. You need to be able to explain what they're telling you in Congress. And a lot of it's pulling the wool over their eyes. You know, there are changes coming, and don't mistake that. Are they going to be for the good, for the better? They've never really fully researched that, and we're not on the right path to researching it. So you need people in the Congress that are going to be able to understand what's going on and put legislation in. We need more research into exactly what the long-term effects of global change and warming are. A lot of them will be healing, basically. The Earth is very, very strong-willed, and if you look at the charts for the last million years, you're looking at a 0.3, 0.4 degree change, and they make it look like it's huge, but it's the scale's very narrow.
Right.
So you need people who can explain this, and then figure out what the solutions are to our problems. All
right, I got less than a minute, real quick. Why should people, first of all, come out and support you and maybe pick up your book?
Well, the big thing, the book is eye-opening. First of all, for anyone that's interested, it does have all the charts and the graphs in it, and it's a wonderful piece that explains everything, including the economy. As far as supporting me, I support the people. I will stand behind the people. I will not change my mind, and I cannot be bought or sold because I'm not from that environment.
All right. Well, Andy, thank you so much for coming on talking to us.
Thank you.
Welcome back anytime throughout the process to get your views and your opinion out to everyone here in our area.
I really appreciate that. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for joining us here on Topic A, everyone. Remember, I say this every time when I have a candidate on, learn about them, research them, get involved, be part of your community. Thanks for watching us, everyone. We'll see you next time.